Hello, everyone, and welcome to Road to Reason. I'm Rick Wingrove.
And I'm Paul Sheehan.
And do you have some news announcements, news items, things to talk about?
Yeah, I think everybody pretty much has an idea. We're going to be talking about the debate of the year, which was between Ken Ham, or as I like to call him, Can Ham, and Bill Nye, the science guy.
That was the event of the week, I gotta say.
It surely was. And we're going to talk a little bit later. We're actually going to have Larry Mendoza join us.
Our house biologist.
Our house biologist, absolutely. And as everybody knows, he's got a really solid background in science.
Yep.
Something I don't think that Ken Ham could even hope to approach.
No.
And we are going to have on Chris Rodda to talk about her book,
Liars for Jesus.
Yeah. So she's going to be on shortly. But I want to take a moment, Rick, and I want to talk about whoever's watching can really appreciate the job that Bill Nye did in taking down Ken Ham.
Right.
And I think watching that interview, it really hit me how terrifying someone like Ken Ham can really, I don't want to say brainwash people, but just the bad science, the junk that he makes up, and the absolute necessity. It kind of hit me. It's like, we really got to be out there challenging these people. And one of the goals of this show is, and it always has been, is to give atheists a way to speak truth to power, but also for us to learn how to speak. People like yourself, Rob, Liz Cornwall, Larry Mendoza, sharpening our skills to take on people like Ken Ham. And how vital that really is. And we have a little graphic I want to pull up. I know we've shown it on the show before, of where people can make donations to the show. And I want to bring that up when we get a second and really talk about the importance of financially supporting the show. I want to be able, as the producer, to send you out and to send Rob and Larry and people out to do important interviews. I want to be able to set up debates. I'd love to see one of you guys take on, Ken or Ray Comfort or someone like that. And really, to do that, we need that support. What you're seeing right there is we need people to write a check to Fairfax Public Access in care of our show to make that a reality. One of the things Rick and I talked about, I promise you we'll make this happen, is that I want to start going to churches and I want to play a game. And the game is win $20 free. Just show me that you can get 3 out of 5 questions about the Bible right, that you really know what's in your Bible. And we're going to stand right outside the church. We're going to ask people to answer these questions. Hey, the bill even says, "In God we trust" on it. How can you go wrong? So, every time you write a check to our show, we can go out, we can play this game.
The stumper, though, and I've seen this one stump them. Name the 10 Commandments.
Get all 10 Commandments.
Yeah,
Let's see if you can pull that one
off.
Pull out
8. Pull out 8.
See how that happens.
And name the punishment.
That's a good one, too. See if you still trust in God.
Right.
But first things first, we got our first guest on today, and that's Chris Rodda. Tell us a little bit about Chris, and then we'll have her on.
Chris and I go way back. Chris is the author of a book called Liars for Jesus, in which largely it's debunking the Christian nation mythology, and with a real focus on David Barton, who is probably the biggest, most misinformed apologist for the whole Christian nation mythology. So, but Chris is also, pulling up something here, is also the Senior Research Director for the Military Religious Freedom Foundation. So she's involved with what's going on at the Air Force Academy, if I'm not mistaken, and with the proselytization that's been just part of the program there. But mostly what I think we're going to talk about here is David Barton's revisionism, Christian nation revisionism. Chris, can you hear us?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. David Barton, first let me say that I want to say you and I go way back. It's been about 4 or 5 years ago. I contacted you because we were dealing with a House Resolution 888, I believe. Yep. Which was basically 50 or so excerpts straight from David Barton's book. And they were trying to get these in the congressional record as a way to show that we're a Christian nation because of all these things.
It was more than that. It was actually, they were trying to use it as a backdoor way. It was actually 75 whereas clauses.
75, that's right.
And they were all just history lies from, Barton's books, and, Congress printed Bibles for public schools, and Thomas Jefferson evangelizing, all the Barton lies. Okay, and what's his name? Randy Forbes,
Randy Forbes,
guy who was behind that, and that's been reintroduced every session of Congress since by another number by somebody. Okay, and it was intended as a backdoor way to get the Christian nation history into the public schools, and the reasoning was, hey, if it's a resolution that was just passed by Congress, a teacher could teach it as like current events. Congress just passed this.
Right. And what was interesting, what happened with that back when they tried to pass that the first time, was that, and this is a little thing I found out about lobbying, is that talking to a senator or a representative is in most cases pointless. What I managed to do is find somebody on staff who was doing research. Staffer doing research on this. And I said, look, dude, here's some facts that directly contradict what they're trying to sell here. And the guy said, okay, I think this is what we need. And a day later, the thing was dead, just because there was not a true fact in the thing as far as I could tell. But you gave me very good information.
Some like 8-part series on that. I believe I was on Talk to Action, talktooaction.org, great resource website for stuff about these dominionists and all this stuff going on with the religious, political stuff. It took me like an 8-part series to debunk all of the lies in that one single resolution. I mean, it was just this litany, this masterpiece.
Chris, I just want to ask, some of our viewers may not be familiar with your book and these lies. Can you give us like some of the really egregious things just right off, just kind of bullet point them that you really took on, and then we can start diving a little more into what they were? Well,
one of the big ones, they use them for certain purposes. So say they have the one that, very popular one that Barton uses all the time. He whips out this old Bible and says, Congress printed this Bible for the use of schools in 1782. Okay, because the whole thing is to say, look, the founders' intent was to have the Bible in schools. It's absolutely not true. Congress had nothing to do with printing this Bible. It was a private printer, and the printer had the Congress verify its accuracy. But that was more to promote the printing industry than the Bible. They didn't print, and they had nothing to do with paying for this or anything. But all Barton has to say is Congress printed this Bible for the use of schools. Boom, you have all these people, Fox News viewers and whatever, thinking, look, the founders wanted the Bible in public schools. Okay, so that's a real big one. Let's see, what else have they been using a lot lately? Benjamin Franklin called for prayers in the Constitutional Convention, and prayers. The whole Constitutional Convention got up and marched to church together for 3 days, and that's how the Constitution was saved and all this. Of course, they bring that up because of the wanting the legislative prayers of like local, state government, the meetings. There was a Supreme Court case recently on that, the town of Greece up in New York State. So they'll take these things, and like what Franklin did was really a manipulation. He wanted to get the people to stop fighting, and he had all these egomaniacs at the Constitutional Convention and said, hey, we need God's help, knowing their response would be, no, we can get this done, we don't need, and I think Alexander Hamilton supposedly said, we don't need help from an outside power or whatever. So they twist these stories.
Right, and House Resolution 888 was, of course, as you say, a litany of misinformation, but his book, The Myth of Separation, had so many misquotes and made-up quotes in it. You want to talk about that?
Well, yeah, that was his first book. I believe that was in, excuse me, like 1988. So he puts that book out. Then he gets called out on some of the really egregious quotes. So then he puts out this book called Original Intent, which still has all the same lies in it. Okay, and the whole thing is it's got like, 1,000 however many footnotes. So it's like the footnotes. And this is one of these things where, like, to know how to, like, argue this stuff with people, like you're saying with the science stuff, it's very similar, is that's a big thing that needs to be addressed, is why his followers believe him. It's because he's got them convinced that having all these footnotes means the stuff must be true, even though if you look up the footnotes, they either lead to nowhere or don't support what he says. But if you read anybody defending David Barton, what you're going to see is, but he's got the original sources, he's got all the footnotes. Okay, so they think that having the documents, having the footnotes somehow means he can't have misquoted stuff. They really believe that.
Plus, as I recall, between the first edition of that book and the second edition of his first book, there were 11 or 12 of the quotes which were so discredited, they were just made up.
Oh, he had to put out a list. You might hear something with those quotes, that list he put out he calls them unconfirmed quotes, as if he's going to, find them somewhere, whatever. Now, the public school Bible curriculum, the National Council on Bible in Public Schools, whatever it's called. Okay, Barton is on their board. Guess where, I think 6 of those quotes that Barton tells his followers on his website not to use, guess where they ended up? In the Bible curriculum that's being used in public schools in 38 states, even though Barton is on the board of that Bible curriculum. So yeah, he doesn't want people to use those quotes. How did they end up in a curriculum for public schools that he is on the board of?
Yeah. But they were deleted from the second edition of the book. They were
but then he came out with his Jefferson book, the Jefferson Lies, where he accuses, all the academics, like you can't trust any academics, any real historians, because they're all lying to you. And that, of course, got pulled by Thomas Nelson.
Withdrawn from print. It was so
right. And
so
what I've been working on,
Chris,
Liars for Jesus.
Chris, I guess the question I have for you there is, so what we're suggesting, or I think is being hypothesized here, is that he is on this board, he says don't use these, but within his own community, they still use them.
No, not within his own community. This is actually, these quotes are in the Bible curriculum that is being used in public schools right now.
But I thought
even though he knows they're not real quotes, because he himself put them on his unconfirmed quotes list when he got called out on them years ago.
I guess what I'm suggesting is that he's trying to distance himself from it in one case.
Right.
But surreptitiously, he is promoting it. Okay.
Right.
Just keep the lies alive with the faithful, I guess, is what he's doing.
Exactly.
Well, and trying to spread them. Their big thing is to spread this stuff into the public schools, and they're making a lot of headway. I mean, look at, the members of Congress, say like Randy Forbes and these other, he's got this thing called the Congressional Prayer Caucus. It's about a quarter of our House of Representatives belongs to a thing called the Congressional Prayer Caucus, and they're the ones behind all this unconstitutional religious legislation and all of that stuff, right? And now you have a quarter of our House of Representatives who are of an age where when they went to school, they weren't deliberately taught history wrong. Now we have a generation that's being deliberately taught history wrong. What is Congress going to look like 20 years from now? It's scary.
It is scary, except, I keep kind of getting the feeling that maybe they've peaked. They're so bad right now that maybe it's peaked.
People say that every so often, and especially after every election where a Democrat wins, the religious right is dead. No, we've got to...
I don't think they're dead. I think that we may be seeing, the peak of their influence. I think with the millennials coming up, and how many of the millennials are the nuns, the unaffiliated. that is going to make a difference. And as the old angry white Christians die off, the millennials.
Have you watched any videos of these Christian youth?
Yeah,
that crowds of thousands of them with their hands in the air to Jesus, and all of that. I mean,
it's not going away tomorrow, and it's not going to go quietly. But
one of the things I think about is when you talk about education, when you talk about people being intelligent, it takes generations to build that.
It does.
It only takes a generation of ignorance to totally destroy that. And I guess what this guy's doing is he's basically he's telling lies until it becomes the truth.
Very, very Huxleyan.
Yes.
Yeah. What is it? 58,000 repetitions.
He's the most famous of the historical revisionists, but it's not just Barton. Like when I wrote Liars for Jesus, that was my first book, and that includes debunkings not just of Barton's stuff, but of a whole bunch of the historical revisionists. My newer books, I'm working on a series. Two of the volumes are out now, debunking in detail Barton's Jefferson lies. Mm-hmm. The book that was pulled, but Glenn Beck has vowed to out a new edition through his Mercury Inc. publishing, whatever. So that book's not going away. So I've got my books are just called Debunking Barton's Jefferson Lies.
Right.
I'm sure that'll be.
Debunkingbarton.com is my website for it.
I'm sure that'll be required reading at Beck University, that higher institution.
Do you know Liberty University has my book that has Liars for Jesus in their library? The Liberty University Law School.
Didn't know that.
So they probably use it for the law students. It's like this is what you're going to be up against.
Well, as far as the lay person goes, the average atheist skeptic, where would you if somebody was defending Dave Barton? How would you go about teaching the layperson to spank them in that argument? What would you drive home as something that's pretty on the surface egregious with his lies?
The one example that I came up with that a lot of other people are using just because it was just a really good example I stumbled across and wrote about. There's a John Adams letter that Barton has that he claims says that John Adams said that governments weren't legitimate unless they were ordained by the Holy Ghost. Okay? That letter, Barton is cutting off the part where it clearly shows that Adams went on to say that he was being sarcastic. Okay? That is a letter that there is no way anyone can argue with it as far as if you say, read the next sentence of that letter.
Right.
And it's something like that where you can just show somebody an example where this sentence is clearly and deliberately chopped off.
Or added, like his addition to the letter to the Danbury Baptists about how Jefferson really meant for this separation of church and state to protect the churches, not protect the churches from government.
The whole one-way wall thing.
The one-way wall, yeah, which was a flat lie.
Right. Well, the big lie they use about the Danbury letter is that the Danbury Baptists wrote it because they were afraid that the First Amendment was going to take away their religious freedom. Okay, now first of all, the letter was written in 1802. The First Amendment had been ratified like a decade earlier. And also, the letter had nothing to do with the First Amendment. The letter was talking about the government of Connecticut, their state government. Okay? Right. But see, this is the thing. The kind of people who follow Barton, it's like the kind of people who follow Ken Ham and will believe anything he says and thinks he makes sense. And this is why, I have more allies who really get what I'm doing among the science crowd than among historians. Because they recognize how similar it is and how the end goals are really the same.
Well, I do want to say that, Ken Ham held that debate in his museum, and his followers had to watch, him not be able to answer a lot of the questions for Bill Nye. So I am very grateful for the way that you take on Dave Barton. And what I'd like to know is, has he ever answered you calling him out? And would you be interested if we could host a debate between you and him?
People always ask me that. Why don't you debate him? I would absolutely love to debate David Barton. I don't think he'd agree to it. The closest he's ever come to saying anything about me was one time on his radio show. He bashed me. I had gone to one of his events and handed him a copy of my book. It was inscribed to the man who inspired me to write this book. And he kind of went on his radio show. And even his recounting of that event was all a lie, okay? And I had he knew I had it on video, okay? So then I put out I rebutted by putting out a whole series of videos, okay, of debunking his entire presentation that I witnessed at this crazy church I went to that night, Right. But he avoids, and he goes after he said, mentioned that I work for the Military Religious Freedom Foundation,
right.
And yes, we are the people with all the stuff, the Air Force Academy, and much, much more. He's always going after my boss, Mikey Weinstein, who founded the Military Religious Freedom Foundation, but he'll never mention me on any of his radio shows where he's talking about the foundation. He's afraid to mention my name. I think he's afraid people might look me up and actually read some of my stuff. So what he does when he says he's rebutting the critics, he's rebutted his critics. He'll go after that Throckmorton guy who wrote that rebuttal of his Jefferson lies, or he'll go after, there's this guy Chris Pinto who rebuts him, makes videos and stuff, but he's really kind of a conspiracy theorist himself. So that Barton will go after his critics who have flaws and holes in their arguments.
Has Barton,
he went after his critics, he won't go after me.
Right. So has Barton ever conceded that he's been wrong on anything?
He'll kind of like his unconfirmed quotations list. He worded it as we have not yet found a source, but we know they said stuff like this, but you really shouldn't use these quotes until we find the confirmation of them and trace them to so he's not saying that the quotes are made up. He's saying that they're real, but those academics with their PhDs, they'll come after us, so it's better not to use them.
If only there was some sort of central repository for the works of Thomas Jefferson that could be searched to find his quotes. Perhaps that would be useful.
Just for the record, there is.
Oh, there is? Library of Congress should be good to say.
That's with a caveat. They are actually not finished. The papers of Thomas Jefferson, they still have quite a few years to go, okay? They've been working on this since the 1950s. It started at Princeton, then it moved to the University of Virginia. So I think they're up to volume 30-something, whatever, but they've still got a big gap in the early 1800s and a big gap at the end of his life. But this is where I have to laugh at, Barton's followers who they'll say, I've read all of Thomas Jefferson's writings. Okay, the only person on earth who ever read all of Thomas Jefferson's writings was Thomas Jefferson. Because Thomas Jefferson, it's taken Princeton University and now the University of Virginia have been working on putting together all of Jefferson's writings for 64 years. Okay, nobody's read all of Thomas Jefferson's writings, but people who follow Barton, they don't even understand the amount that Jefferson wrote, and they think if they pick up one book of Thomas Jefferson's writings that was all of it.
No.
Yeah, right.
Well, that would be a challenge I'd like to make today, which is let's do a quiz. Let's just pick some random quotes of Thomas Jefferson's and let's see if he can answer them on our show. I'll give him $20 with a bill that says "In God We Trust" if he can do it. But we're coming up on our break, and what I'd like to do, because we're going to have to let you go here in a minute, is to have you explain a little more about how people can find out more about what you do. We can't actually pitch your book for sale, but where can they find your book? Should they be interested
Oh, you
in getting
just
copies?
look on Amazon, or I have a website, excuse me, debunkingbarton.com or liarsforjesus.com. They both kind of connect to each other. That's the stuff for my history stuff. There's a lot of, a lot of my articles. Like I said, the series of articles I've written. There's a lot of stuff there. And then for the Military Religious Freedom Foundation, which I actually ended up working for because a Barton essay was found in the junior ROTC Core American History textbook. That's how I ended up working for Murph in 2007. That is militaryreligiousfreedom.org.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and before we do finish up, in the last week or so, there was another policy change at the Air Force Academy about proselytization. I think it was in the last week, where basically I think their chief proselytizer had to come out and say, we can't do that anymore. Did I hear that right?
Oh, no, he wasn't their chief. It was the dean of, one of the deans. It was one of the high-ups there. We were extremely pleased because what he did was he cited the Air Force regulation. Here comes my dog about to knock over the stand that my iPad is on. Excuse me, I'm kicking my dog. Okay, so yes, he came out and cited this regulation that Murph, our foundation, had a big role in getting written by not the Air Force Chief of Staff, now the one prior to him, and Chief of Staff still a guy, yeah, the Secretary of the Air Force is a woman now. But we were extremely pleased that someone that high up at the Air Force Academy cited this regulation and said stuff in accordance with it, and it was sort of it was a victory. That's how we look at it, and it coincidentally happened 10 years to the day from when Mikey Weinstein had the idea to start Murph. Not the date Murph was founded, but the incident that made him decide to start the foundation, 10 years to the day.
That's great. And there are two veterans sitting right here, and we've both dealt with that just a little bit. But we've also watched with interest what the Air Force Academy has been going through for the last few years. It's just like the evangelicals just decided they had an open field and would use it as a test case. And we're glad to see you guys. What you've done there is remarkable, and we thank you for that.
And Chris, we do want to thank you. I think this is a topic of immense interest, and it is certainly one we want to revisit with you. We'd love to have you back on as a guest in the near future, and I want to thank you for being with us today.
If you ever are in D.C. Area, look us up, and we'll
have you in live.
Put you right here between us. So,
okay.
But thanks for being on with us today.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
And we'll see you folks after the break.
Richard Dawkins. Doing commercials is unfamiliar territory for me, but I'm inviting you to watch Road to Reason, A Skeptic's Guide to the 21st Century, on Fairfax Public Access every Sunday. Each week the hosts tackle wishful thinking, religion, pseudoscience, and the harm they cause, with a combination of facts, humor, and community involvement. They challenge believers to defend their faith and give you, the skeptic, a voice. With live call-ins for viewers and streaming on the World Wide Web, there's never a dull moment. Don't wait. Look at them now on Facebook and YouTube, and remember to watch Road to Reason, A Skeptic's Guide to the 21st Century, or there'll be hell to pay.
Welcome to Secular Student News with the Secular Student Alliance. I'm Liz Liddell, the Director of Campus Organizing, and I'm here to share some of the week's most exciting secular news and events on high school and college campuses around the world. The big event this week was the Ken Ham-Bill Nye debate on Tuesday evening, Creationism versus Evolution. Despite terrible weather and canceled classes in many parts of the country, student groups organized live-streamed viewing events, and many events provided additional information, post-debate discussions, or other activities. Some events even came up with creative games, such as Creationist Bingo, to play during the games. Attendance at these events in some cases topped 100 people, including non-student and non-secular participants. Tax season is upon us, which presents an interesting service opportunity for one SSA affiliate. The Secular Legal Society at the UNLV Law School participated in their school's volunteer income tax assistance program and is now prepared to assist low-income individuals in their community with the often confusing tax preparation process. Last but not least, registration for the Secular Student Alliance 2014 Annual Conference opens on Monday, February 11th, and we'll also be announcing our major speaker lineups at that time. As always, the SSA's conference is open to students and non-students, and conference sessions are geared towards campus and off-campus group leaders, as well as individual activists. Learn more at secularstudents.org/2014con. You can always learn more about secular students and their work on our website at secularstudents.org. This has been Student News with the Secular Student Alliance. I'm Liz Liddell, and I'll see you next time.
Okay, welcome back to Road to Reason. This half of the show, we're going to talk about what I think was the big event of the week was the Bill Nye Ken Ham debate at the Creationist Museum. And if I may say in an unbiased way, Bill Nye kind of kicked butt on that one. You know, this was kind of a big deal, a bigger deal than a lot of people think, because we may have seen a change. We may have seen the creationist movement peak.
I think we've also seen a watershed moment with the way atheists are going to start tackling these issues. Right.
It's almost like we've been playing not to lose. We've been afraid to take them on. A lot of scientists, and I get this, they don't want to give them the credence by appearing on the same stage with them. And I get that. But what that does is it leaves them with the stage to themselves. They have the floor to themselves. And they win just because we didn't show up.
And they're doing things like, Ken Ham started this foundation in 1979. And this museum is a $27 million endeavor. So if we don't take them on, they have immense amount of resources to go out and uneducate the gullible.
Unlike us, they are quite well funded, they are well determined, and they're not going away without a fight. That's why it's so important to take them on right now. And frankly, if I may wax into football metaphors here, it's time to drive them into the dirt. Because I believe the most salient point here is that they're just wrong. They're just wrong on the facts. They're wrong on the science. They're about biblical revisionism and a lot about presuppositional apologetics.
Well, that's okay.
So it's time to take them on.
They can just make it up if they're wrong.
Which they clearly do. And joining us now is our resident and our in-house biologist, Larry Mendoza. How you feeling today, Larry?
Hopefully my voice is not too raspy. I'm trying to overcome the flu. But glad to join.
You got the flu in spite of a vaccination. You got the flu shot, still got the flu. So we're seeing perhaps a little bit of evolution in action here, I think.
Well, I will tell you one thing. Last year I got the flu shot and I got both strains of the flu. This year I just got strain A. But let me tell you one thing about vaccines. My symptoms are not as bad, and I'm overcoming it in 3 days as opposed to 5. So I still recommend everybody getting a flu vaccine. It's not 100% like anything else in life, but it still helps, and it's helping me tremendously. I feel much better now than I did yesterday even. So.
Good.
And statistically speaking, you're less likely to die from the flu.
Yeah.
Right.
So anyway, glad you could be here to join with us today. This is an important topic. So we had this debate. What was your take on it, Larry?
Well, I will quote Carl Sagan here. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that's the foundation and the heart of the scientific method. And what Ken Ham was trying to do was speak out of both sides of his mouth. At the one side, he tried to say that creationism is scientific. On the other hand, he refused to admit that no evidence would ever change his mind.
Right.
That in and of itself is unscientific, therefore should not be used in a science classroom. I mean, that's just one of many fallacies that Ken Ham was conducting. Needless to say, I think a chimp could have gone on there and defeated Ken Ham on this. It wasn't very hard to refute. Ken Ham is not a very good apologist, and he certainly is not a very good debater. But, you know, there are people who believe the literal story of creation, which is these are the people who he's pandering to.
Right. And of course, there were a lot of people who said that, or there was a famous quote that he lost just by showing up. It's not the way I saw it. I think this is a fight we had to have. This is perhaps the highest profile of the debates on this subject so far. Bill Nye's well respected, widely recognized, and he took him on and beat him on the science. He beat him on the facts and left Ken Ham struggling just just forced him into apologism over the Old Testament.
Well, and I think it's important to mention too, he was not responding a lot to a lot of Bill's questions. He was evading them. But what I found really interesting, and Larry, I don't know if you agree with this or not, what really scared me about this, I think we lost the connection there.
I'm here. I'm back.
Okay. There he is. Okay.
Sorry.
What really scared me about watching this was that someone like Ken Ham thought that he could take on Bill, and I know there's a lot of people, you say like a chimp could beat him, that's fine, but in many aspects he did conduct himself in a very calm and in a double-speak Orwellian kind of way. He carried himself. And to people who are not knowledgeable on things like biology, DNA, archaeology, he's an extremely dangerous person to the ignorant.
Plus, he snuck in some redefinitions, or he tried to sneak in redefinitions of words, like the word literal. He was pressed one time on biblical literalism, and literally redefined the word literal. He just didn't want to. He didn't want to handle. He didn't want to have to apologize for biblical literalism, even though that's exactly what he was doing the whole time.
What are your thoughts on that, Larry?
No, absolutely. I think Rick hit the nail on the head on that one. I mean, when called on what literal interpretation means, he totally tried to redefine that word, as Rick said. But the thing is that people like Ken Ham are dangerous for two reasons. Number one, they have money. Okay, and number two, there's 40% of people in this country who are not very scientifically literate, and that's the problem. I would like to say, though, and slightly disagree with Rick on this, is that, you know, I think Bill Nye losing by just showing up it's not that simple. I think that giving these people a platform to speak on, it's kind of like a double-edged sword. So it's like if Richard Dawkins were to debate Ken Ham, for example, which this is the reason why he doesn't do it, is because it gives them credibility. As Richard Dawkins said, it may look good on their resume, but it would look very bad on his.
Right.
And I think that's what a lot of the atheists in the community were really saying, is that why are we even why are we giving this guy publicity? His Noah's Ark park, by the way, is losing money. He's not able to finish this park. He needs all the publicity he can get right now, and this was really a publicity stunt, I think, on his part. I don't think he was there to try to change the minds of the people that don't believe in creationism.
But there is another side to this, Larry, and that is to say that his flock had to watch that debate. Mm-hmm. There were questions brought up. Now they need to answer for themselves. And I think it is a mistake for people to say you can't change the minds of the religiously ignorant. I think we see it all the time. People change their opinions on this stuff. So, I mean, I would also suggest there is an inherent importance in debating these people because their followers are going to show up by the very nature of the debate. And I think he did get destroyed. And I don't think that you have to be like a brainiac to realize that this guy was evading questions and not answering them.
But we have to carry on the fight. We can't just let them sell this story without countering their arguments. We have to attack it.
I mean, I completely agree with that. And as I said, it's a double-edged sword.
It is.
But here's the thing. I think the way to combat ignorance is with education, right? And I think we need to invest in this country. We need to invest in our education. We need to teach our children STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and get them started at a very young age. The brain, as it develops the most. It has the most brain cells at the age around 5, I believe, between 3 and 5. That's where the brain absorbs the most, right? If you start introducing critical analysis and critical thinking at a very young age, you are more apt to see people grow up to believe more in things like critical reasoning than they would in something like creationism, which is based on something that's completely extraordinary and supernatural.
Yeah, and Bill Nye, to his credit, hit on that topic of science education and the correct definition and use of science on a number of occasions. He kept driving that point home. He went in, whoever advised him, well, don't attack religion. It was unnecessary to attack religion. And it makes you seem less strident if you're just sticking to the facts, which he did, and keep bringing back the importance of science education and the implications if we don't.
Right, and that is exactly it. I mean, you have got to, science education is what it is. That's why he was, Bill Nye. I loved how he came out there and he was just like almost pleading to the voters of Kentucky to go out there and vote out ignorance and vote in education and reason. And I love that about Bill Nye. And I think that's why we all love Bill Nye for that. He really was trying to popularize science back in the day. I mean, who hasn't watched the show Bill Nye, the Science Guy?
Right.
And it seems like Ken also, in a very Orwellian sense, has a newspeak. He comes up with historical science. And I was always taught that's called history.
Yeah.
And it's like you're creating new words, new terminologies to fit your kind of boneheaded philosophy to patent or to pad to make it sound like you know what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. And in the academic world, have you ever heard of historical science?
He was trying to introduce a way, it was an apologetics move, to just define it in a way that he would support him.
Look, the thing is, that the point is moot, whether you want to define historical science or whatever you want to say. Here's the thing about science. What we know about evolution has nothing, it has to do with history, but the way we study it is in the here and now. We use empirical methods, the scientific method, to study evolution. Especially with the big boom in the molecular genomic era, this gave us the tools to actually study evolution at a molecular level, on the genetic level, to see how genes evolved, how we are interrelated with other species, how closely or how far apart we are related to various species. There are some genes that are so conserved that were probably there in the first, were the precursors of the first life on Earth. So what Ken Ham was doing was completely just he had a conclusion, and he was desperately trying to find evidence, which is what most people like Intelligent Design, all those guys do, is that they already have a conclusion. They already have their mindset on what they want that conclusion to be, and they're trying to work backwards to find the evidence. That's not how science works.
No, that's
why it always fails.
That's the exact opposite of science, and we all saw the memes on Facebook and all over the web this week of what would it take to convince you you're wrong, and Ken Ham's response was basically nothing.
Nothing.
And Bill Nye's was evidence. Just prove me wrong. Just show me the evidence.
And then there's the other one, and being politically correct here, is say historical science one more time, mother. It's just like...
I think that should have been turned into a drinking game.
Go ahead, mention that book one more time. Make my day.
Well, I just want to... go ahead, Rick.
I was just going to say that another thing, if you watched at all, you notice that He absolutely ignored some of the more devastating evidence that was thrown at him by Bill Nye. The 680,000 layers of ice in Antarctica, the tree that's 9,500 years old, older than Earth. And his responses were like the tree, you don't know how many rings that thing showed up with. Or the thing we saw about the speed of light, just because it is a measure of distance, not of time, but just because something is millions of light years away doesn't mean that it took the light millions of years to get here.
Yes, it does.
Well, yeah, that's exactly what that means. But again, one of the other things he tried to massage his way around and just failed. It was a gigantic fail for him.
And by the way, I really loved how Bill Nye really kept harping on the fact to asking Ken Ham, show me what creationism can predict. Show me what it can predict, because science, one of the key tenets of science is the idea of predictability. You have to make predictions, and then you test those predictions using the empirical scientific method.
Exactly.
And creationism does not make predictions because everything is already there.
I can make a prediction. I can make a prediction for creationism. If creationism is true, we'll find dinosaur bones with wet DNA among in historical sediment.
He tried to say that with the 45,000-year-old wood
under basalt,
in the basalt or whatever. And here's a geology lesson that Ken Ham probably never had. I took geology in college. Sometimes, as the Earth and plate tectonics goes, there are extrusions within the layers based on many different things, like, for example, as continents continents are coming together, things kind of get mushed up and layers kind of start to deform within the Earth. And so, but the layer itself, okay, may be on top of, like an older layer, maybe on top of a younger layer. Okay, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that older layer, is out of whack. It just means that it was the geology of the Earth that brought it forth, and that was one of the things that any geologist and any stratigrapher, I think it's called, would tell you, that the layers of the Earth are not always going to be nice, neat little stacks. A lot of times they are, and that's convenient. But sometimes they're not.
Well, and that's one thing I wanted to talk about too, because what he was trying to suggest is that the younger wood was inside the older rock. And I don't have any proof of that other than him claiming it.
Yeah, I've never seen that sample myself.
And I would say, fine. Okay, if you want to put that out there, let's examine it. That's what science is supposed to be able to do. If you have an extraordinary claim, let's put it out there, let's look at it. And even if we can't explain it, it doesn't mean whatever cockamamie story you've come up with is automatically the proof of it. And he just was like, hey, they found this thing, and therefore it was like, well, first of all, they found it, you didn't find it, Ken. And beyond that, you don't really have an explanation for how it happened. You're just using something that appears to be that way to articulate that you're right and everybody else is wrong. And that's a very dangerous way to go about science.
Well, it is. And one of the more slimy things he did, one of his more slimy approaches, was to say, dinosaurs, creation, you weren't there. You don't know it. But we have a book. So, he says he has a book, but he doesn't know who wrote it. He said God wrote it. He wasn't there. He doesn't know who wrote that book.
I'll tell you, we have something that much better than a fallacious book written by man. We have DNA. We have that. We have fossils. We have physics, biochemistry. We have
lots of books.
Astronomy. Yeah. We have more than one book.
More than one.
And so that was absolutely just an incredible thing to say. It's completely an utter poo-poo. To keep it light here, but yeah, he was just grasping at straws, but that's typical. I mean, that's typical argumentation from a biblical literalist. That's where to get their information from.
Yeah, and he seemed a little more desperate as time went along, and really, for me, the low point of his presentation was when he had to refute science, by showing the genealogy, the stacked genealogy chart of how they get to a 6,000-year-old Earth. That was just, to my eye, just pathetic.
But there's something inherently cool about the fact that this guy, even as bad of a denier as he is, still can't get away from the tree of life. It's just for him, it started 4,000 years ago.
Right.
I mean, he's kind of has to admit that there is this thing called evolution and natural selection, but it only begins 4,000. Like, all these tens of thousands of species exploded, and a lot of them all died off in the last 4,000 years.
No, I really loved how Bill Nye used some mathematics to completely destroy that argument, because Ken Ham, if he's right, he believes in super evolution, like ultra evolution.
Right.
I mean, we're talking evolution that we would see species, as he said, like
40 new species a day.
And dying off.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Right.
And as Rick pointed out, we don't, in 4,000 years, if in fact 4,000 years is a solid date, which it's not, we would have wet samples of dino DNA, like we have woolly mammoths, like we have
Which are
bog men,
12,000 years
which
old.
are 12,000 years old. So there would be, there would not, you'd have some type of, anything, whether it be plants, whether it be mammals from past 4,000 years ago, you'd have wet DNA samples of at least some of them.
And by the 4,000 year figure, we're naturally talking about the Great Flood.
Yeah.
And it's funny, too, how the Chinese, the Indians, the Sumerians, the Egyptians, civilizations older than the 6,000 year.
And they have and of all their recorded writings, they don't have descriptions of any of these
They don't
animals.
seem to have noticed the flood or anything.
And from an archaeological standpoint, there's no refuse piles of dino bones that are gnawed on by humans or cooked. There's no Bronto, foot, thrown in the pile with the old rotting grapefruits and things of that nature.
The story is so ridiculous that, when Pat Robertson is telling Ken Ham to stop making a fool out of himself, that's telling right there.
Right. That's like twice in the last 2 years I've agreed with Pat Robertson. That's very disquieting.
But Larry, do you think Pat Robertson is telling him to stop talking because he sounds like a fool, or do you think Pat Robertson is telling him to stop talking because he's letting the cat out of the bag, that they're all full of it?
I think it's a little bit of both. Pat Robertson's, when I first saw that, I was like, well, look who's calling the kettle black. Pat Robertson is not exactly sane himself, or he's very smart and knows how to make money very well. But here's the thing about Pat Robertson. He made a lot of money in mining diamonds in Africa, right? Well, guess what? Diamonds, guess what those things are? It's nothing more than compressed carbon that over the course of millions of years. So Pat Robertson, if he understands diamonds, he should understand the age of the earth.
Indeed.
Well, and that kind of goes to put us back to what Rick was talking about earlier about, and you commented on, about taking these people on and the importance of it. It seems to me like people like Pat Robertson don't want people like Ken Ham talking in a broader public forum, because it does expose their corniness. And if they're only able just to preach within their own community to their ignorant flock, then you really can't debunk them to the people that are really believers. So it does kind of take us back to the necessity of taking these people on.
We got to take it on head on.
Well, here's the thing, right? So I think literal creationists, people that believe the Bible literally like him and Ham, I think there are a minority. I don't think they are mainstream Christians. Most Christians reject the literal creation story, and a lot of Christians do accept evolution as the most viable way that life diversified on Earth. Now, these are the people that I think are more serious, and these are the people that I think we need to engage a little bit more. Nonetheless, yes, I agree. The creationists, these guys, these are easy to beat, but I have seen Christianity evolve, so to speak, into having to change its doctrine based on scientific knowledge. And that's why I keep harping on the fact that the more scientific discoveries we make, the better off we are. And it's something that I cannot remember who said it first, whether it was John Shook or Babinski in a debate with, I think it was William Lane Craig, where he called it theology at the edge of scientific knowledge, okay? That's where God hides, is there. And as we expand our knowledge of science, of what we know, God becomes less and less relevant. And religion is going to be forced to redefine itself in a way where it has to become compatible with the science that is available and things that we know.
Yeah, you know,
it's just a matter of time.
We've just got a couple of minutes left, but and I don't want to overstate the case about this debate. I think it was important, and I think it may have been a watershed event, even if it's not obvious to everybody. But it reminds me of a quote from Hunter Thompson, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, where he said, with the right kind of eyes, you can see the high water mark, where the wave broke and washed back. And I think we may have seen that. We may have seen the peak. And, you know, I think we were waiting for the right event. It's a tipping point type of event, maybe. I think we're going to see more debates, and we're going to see creationism finally get confronted head on and crushed.
Well, and I hope you're right, Rick, and I think that's hopefully the case. But let me say one quick thing. I love how Bill Nye mentioned Tiktaalik, you know, the transitional fossil
lungfish,
between water and land animals. Well, I met Neil Shubin. He gave a talk at Howard Hughes Medical Institute. And just to kind of plug in, and I am not speaking for the Howard Hughes Medical Institute, but there's pretty soon this year, they're going to air on PBS I think it's going to be an hour long or something like that, called Your Inner Fish, which is Neil Shubin's first
Looking forward to that,
book.
yeah.
Yeah, and it's produced by Tangled Bank Studios, which is HHMI's new movie production company.
Which is where you work.
Which is where I work.
At HHMI, Howard Hughes Medical Institute.
Yes, but I am in no way speaking for them on this show.
No, I understand.
And Larry, I want to thank you for being with us. And
thanks for dragging yourself out of bed. And
we're going to be coming up. We got about 20 seconds left. And I just want to remind people to check us out on Facebook, like us, help promote us. We're sitting real close and getting on to 900 views.
We've got some guests coming up, like Lawrence Krause. We think
Lawrence Krause is lined up, people. So make sure you spread the word.
Okay.
And until next week, this is Road to Reason, a skeptic's guide to the 21st century, and it's been real. Love ya. Check us out.
Check us next time and read your Bible.
Bible. Read it, baby.
We good?